Your problem is you have bones.
Because we don't.
So let's get rid of those bones.
Welcome back and welcome home to HBO's The Sympathizer podcast, where we're debriefing and decoding the new HBO original limited series, The Sympathizer, which is based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel of the same name. I'm Philip Nguyen, a scholar of Vietnamese American culture, and on this podcast, I'll be joined by The Sympathizer's creators, the cast and crew, and of course, author Viet Thanh Nguyen himself. After every episode, we have gone deeper into the characters, their motives, and how this espionage thriller / cross-cultural satire complicates what we know about the Vietnam War, aka the American War in Vietnam, and its depiction in US pop culture today. Looking at you, Hollywood. We're at the end of the road, y'all. Today, we're talking about our last episode, episode 7, titled Endings Are Hard, Aren't They? But we are going out with a bang. And here's our lineup of guests for today. We've got our 3 musketeers, actor Hoa Xuande, Duy Nguyen, and Fred Nguyen Can. We've got executive producer Niv Fichman and author Viet Thanh Nguyen. And finally, we'll bring back Hoa Xuande to have a quick visit with actor Robert Downey Jr. But first, spoiler alert, by now you know the drill. If you haven't seen episode 7 and finished the series, go and watch it right now. Rewatch it. We'll be here whenever you're ready. All right, students / class, it's time to review a bit of what went down in episode 7. In Bangkok, the night before the mission, Claude reveals that he has the captain's confession to Sunny on tape.
I am a communist. I've been an agent for years. For the revolution. I infiltrated the secret police and sent intelligence back to Hanoi. Even now, I report on reaction activities and do everything I can to undermine them.
But the captain won't confess to Claude and instead goes on the mission, where everyone dies except for the captain and Bon, who are taken to a re-education camp. After a year in solitary, writing countless drafts of his confession, the captain is finally taken to see the commissar, who has been badly burned by napalm and wears a bag over his head, who later reveals himself to be Mung. At this point, we've come to realize that nothing, especially war, ever dies. The reveal of a napalm-burnt Mun as the commissar reminds us of Nick Ut's Pulitzer Prize-winning photo featuring Kim Phuc, also known as Napalm Girl, as she flees her village after it was torched by the jelly gas that burned at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. During the course of the war, over 388,000 tons of napalm were dropped on Southeast Asia, in addition to the 7.5 million tons of American bombs dropped on Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia for the largest aerial bombardment in human history. Back to our story, at the re-education camp, Mun has read all the drafts of the captain's confessions and still finds them lacking.
Cậu miêu tả cách cậu đã viết những mẩu tên mật dưới những dòng chữ như thế nào.
You described how you wrote hidden messages between the lines.
Điều tôi muốn là những ký ức nằm ẩn dấu giữa những dòng chữ.
What I want are the memories that are hidden between the lines. A series of torture-induced flashbacks lead the captain to a childhood memory. A French priest, departing a visit with the captain's mother, spots a very young captain and offers biscuits, noting that they share the same eyes. The priest's image morphs into that of Claude, the auteur, the congressman, and Professor Hammer, as they promise him biscuits every month if he can keep a secret. Eventually, the captain's memories delve deeper into the communist spy's interrogation from episode 1, and we find that the captain has been leaving out some major details of the violence perpetrated against her and his own complicity. Finally, the captain understands the true meaning of the slogan, "Nothing is more precious than independence and freedom." His re-education is complete. With Mung's help, the captain and Bon escape the re-education camp. They join a large group of refugees to escape Vietnam by boat.
Destination? Who knows where? Away from home. That's all I know. Will we make it there? According to the boatman, our chances are 50-50. Pretty good odds, says Bon.
As the boat carries the captain, Bon, and the other refugees away toward an unknown future, ghost after ghost appear, standing motionless along the shore and in the water, watching silently. The losses of the war and its aftermath continue to haunt the memories of the people who survived it. For 2 decades after 1975 and the fall of Saigon, escaping torture and re-education, over 3 million refugees from Southeast Asia fled and resettled abroad in diaspora, with more than 1 million establishing their new home in the United States. As secrets are revealed and the masks come off, for the post-war generation, the children of these refugees whose makeshift memories are composed only of American war movies and the manifestations of their families' lasting trauma, we yearn to remember the lives and legacies of those lost and those who live to tell their stories. And now, at the end of the series, a reflection on its beginnings and how you wrap up a story as momentous as this one, with returning guests, author Viet Thanh Nguyen and executive producer Niv Fichman. Let's take a look back. Let's restart. Let's recollect to go back to the origin story of how both of you got involved in this process. I had heard that it's been about 8 years in the making. What was that origin story for you two meeting and making this adaptation happen?
Well, I believe Niv found me, tracked me down, hunted me with the persistence of a predator.
Well, he wrote it. I mean, that's pretty much an origin right there. That had nothing to do with me. But I read the book. It was given to me by, one of my closest friends. His name is Kim Lee. He's an actor and producer who lives in Vietnam. And he thought it would be an amazing book to adapt. And, Kim was the one who tracked you down, in fact, through the Vietnamese internet, diaspora internet, and arranged for us to have a lunch together.
Mm. And there's backstory to the backstory, which was that, by the time Kim and Niv came along, there'd been numerous other people who had contacted me to try to make this. And I wasn't really interested in most of them, but I did agree to work with one producer before Niv, and they went off. This was soon after the Pulitzer, I think. They went off for several months to try to sell this book. And they were not successful. Niv's persistence, his doggedness in the face of many, many obstacles in Hollywood, which we can elaborate on. But I think that persistence of Niv is what ultimately made the series possible.
Does it look like what you had imagined it would be when you were writing the novel?
No, I didn't. I mean, I did not imagine it was going to be a movie or a TV series. It was a novel, so it was all constructed inside my head. So this is a totally different creation. So in engaging in what is essentially a collaborative enterprise to make this TV series, I did have to trust in our collaborators. And I'm just really, really fortunate, I think, that we ended up with exactly the right people, not just Park Chan-wook, but Don McKellar and A24 and HBO. It's been, in retrospect, now that the series is done, really a great assembly of talent.
Yeah. I think what was so refreshing about the series for me was that it was funny. There was so much of this dark humor. And I think for me, episode 7 also kind of felt like a karaoke session, because the music that we hear in episode 7 is very, I think the satire comes out in the songs that are used, particularly Bon in the outhouse, and he is singing a very classical South Vietnamese song in Saigon Dat Blam, right? And then we have this moment where the captain is singing the mỗi người vì một người, một người vì một người slogan to kind of make that connection between the commissar. And then, of course, the ending, which still, I think, is sitting with me, where we, again, hear the Dai Ka Dem Dem, Bai Ka Dem Dem, which we had heard in the first episode, right? So there's this recall to the first episode for the song that's used as the captain Bon and this group of refugees becomes refugees again. I mean, Viet, could you talk a little bit about the musicality in your novel and in the series?
I grew up in a Vietnamese refugee community in San Jose, California in the 70s and 80s, and there's always a soundtrack to that. I grew up with an older generation who really loved French pop music and who also loved Vietnamese pop music as well. So I heard a lot of that. And, I was exposed to that in Chinese wedding banquets. And so we have a recreation of that with the longevity rest scene earlier in the series, and also grew up watching Paris by Night with my parents, and we have that redone as Fantasia here. And so that was always really critical. And when I was writing the novel, I knew that there would be songs inside the novel because these people, Vietnamese people, love pop music, all kinds of music too. And so there had to be references to songs inside. And then there also had to be a mood for the novel. And so certainly listening, especially re-listening to the music of Jin Gong Sun was part of my work in giving an atmosphere to the novel, especially the songs of Jin Gong Sun as sung by Kunli. That, listening to their greatest hits compilation, which I listened to it over and over and over again. And so that music suffuses the atmosphere of the novel, but also the rhythms of the sentences as well. So the challenge for the team was how to take that musicality and make it present somehow through the playing of the songs, but also the significance of the songs to the people in the show itself. But also you as a viewer, if you're familiar with these songs like Saigon Dap Lam,
Right.
most Vietnamese people would know this song. And then of course it's so discordant and disjunctive to have Bon singing it in this terrible situation.
Right. It's like diegetic for the characters that are in the series, but then also for the audience watching it, there's this aha moment, right? The episode ends with this very tender intergenerational moment between Bon and this baby in the boat. And I would imagine that for a lot of our listeners and the watchers of the series who may be from the Vietnamese diaspora or from any other diasporas or come from people who are in a way products of war, I would want to ask you both on what sorts of messages would you want to leave for the next generation after they have finished watching this series? I'll start with you, Niv.
That's so tough to ask me in front of the author, But, for sure, we want to leave a message of hope. The fact that the captain is still a fighter inside, this has not beaten him down this past year of being in re-education, and he's still revolutionary inside, and looking to the future. So the baby certainly represents that. And of course, has resonance of baby Duke that Bon lost at the end of episode 1. The fact that he can calm the baby is like such a beautiful mythical way of saying that his connection to the future is really embodied in that. And it was really, really touching to film that scene because, the ship itself, it was just so difficult to film it because it was just bobbing in the water too much. And so they built this exact replica of the ship, and then we kind of crowded all these people in there. And we're in, it was nighttime, and you could just feel the presence of that music and the hope and the despair and everything. It was super moving for the entire crew to film that. And the baby really was crying. And then the baby really was calmed down. So there's some kind of a beautiful spiritual connection that we knew we were at the end. It was, hope and the future and resignation for all of us as well. So it was just a beautiful moment.
In addition to everything that Niv said, one thing I would hope that viewers would take away with the next generation would be that multiple things can exist simultaneously. So even in this final moment where the captain is talking in his monologue and he's looking at the beach and there are all these ghosts that are there of the people who've been left behind and the people who've died, at the same time, there's that idea that we will live, we continue, we start over. And to me, that is necessary to maintain both possibilities at the same time. Like, we can't forget the past. We can't forget everybody who died. We can't forget the terrible trauma that's been inflicted on all these people from all different sides. And yet we have to find a way to start over. We have to find a way to continue to live. And there's that paradox that I think is at the heart of the entire novel. The sympathizer is always a man of two faces, always a man of dualities, always trying to figure out the gray zone and everything in between. And at the end of the novel, we're still there with him. We're still there with someone who has lost one revolution but wants to find another one. And both of those things can be true at the same time. Just because your revolution has failed doesn't mean you give up on revolution altogether. That's part of the conclusion that he reaches.
Thanks again, Niv and Viet. And now it's time to hear from our three blood brothers, the three musketeers, les trois mousquetaires, actors Hoa Xuande, Duy Nguyen, and Fred Nguyen Can, also known as the Captain, Mun, and Bon. Hoa, Fred, and Duy, welcome, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
It's nice to see you all.
At this point in time, everyone has seen the entire series. They know everything about you and your characters, and we're trying to get a sense of who you are beyond the characters, right? And what that process was like. So the first question I have for you is, I mean, is there a Three Musketeers thing going on in real life? Like, what's the
Wow.
chemistry like?
Oh,
Let's try to be truthful here.
Yeah. Wait, who are you guys?
yeah.
Doesn't have to be a confession. Yeah.
Like I think there'll be if Hoa ever answer my WhatsApp.
yeah.
I'm terrible with WhatsApp. I'm terrible with replies, and that's why like I'm trying to like get onto it every chance that I get.
Yeah.
I don't know. So he answers mine. I don't.
No, we were very close in real life. Also, we bonded during the shoot
Yeah.
because just how
Yeah,
tough
we cut
it was.
ourselves. We had the scar.
Yeah, there were bloods and tears.
The thing that a lot of people won't know actually is that Zoe and I were very close friends before I got cast even. So it's kind of a
amazing.
funny like parallel to the show where our characters Bom and Mang were friends first, and then we meet the captain as kids, and then it kind of felt that way where Zoe was like, okay, now you go hang out with Hoa while you guys shoot, and at this point Zoe wasn't cast yet, so
Yeah, you guys met me on a field, and
yeah.
we're like, who's this loser? Let's bring him in.
He needs us. He needs us.
What was it like for y'all the first time on set? So once y'all knew you were going to be part of this all Vietnamese Avengers team of folks that are on, the Sympathizer, right? In this historical moment, what was that like for you all to meet each other?
I mean, because I think I arrived in LA before Hoa did, and the first person I actually met on the cast was V, who plays Lana, and so and on that day it was for camera test, and it was me, V, and Robert Downey Jr. So me and V were just like clinging onto each other, like, okay, we'll figure this out together. And then my first day of shoot, and I think actually the first week or 2 weeks,
it was a good couple of weeks.
Yeah, it was just me and Hoa doing scenes for the Captain and Bom. And so we had no choice but to get along because it was quite intimate at times.
Yeah, had no choice.
How intimate are we talking? We're trying to get as behind the scenes
my
as we
first
can.
day was literally, okay, you're going to cry and then you're going to be naked and Hua's going to wash you. I was like, oh, okay.
And yeah,
Literally met the guy for what, 3 hours, and then I washed him in our underwear.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
and
Well, in my jeans. I was in my jeans.
We're in episode 7 of the podcast, which means that at this point in time, episode 7 has already been released and watched by everyone out there. I know, it's wild, right?
no, oh my god, filming episode 7 was wild. We were like in Thailand for like 3 months, and then it was. I think I filmed most of my stuff for Ep7 in like the span of 2 weeks, and it was like in the middle of like the heat stroke. It was hot, and then the set was like in the middle of like an abandoned. What is it?
Like we built this camp in the middle of Songkla in the like back canyons, desert.
Yeah,
It's like, how, in Dragon Ball when they decide not to fight in the city
Right.
and they go out in the field?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like that. That's where we went.
that's the finale. There we go.
And it was the peak of like Thailand summer.
Oh,
so like
yeah.
it was I don't know what the Fahrenheit is, but
No,
yeah,
it's
it
like
was
at least 4.
Yeah, we're all Celsius.
yeah.
Yeah,
We're
that's
all
true, we're all
Celsius. Yeah.
Celsius.
40. It was like at least
40
100
Celsius.
every day.
Yeah.
And so we were standing in the sun just doing that the entirety of Ep7 in the sun.
And like prop to all the extras. They were
Yeah.
sitting there for
Yeah.
10 hours a day,
Yeah.
and no one complains. Oh, I mean, they were all Thailand. So
yeah,
Thailand is so
probably
much-
complaining in
Maybe
Thai,
they
but-
complain in Thai. But,
Yeah.
Um,
But also like Zui was in prosthetics, and then he has to put a disguise as the commissar over
like-
his prosthetics.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of that in the heat
Yeah.
for days on end. And there
And
was
he has like a trench coat too.
And you
there
have
was
a trench coat.
because why
And-
not?
yeah, and there was a day that we were filming in the commissar's abode up on top of the hill, and do you remember that? You blacked out for a little
I
bit
blacked out.
there. He was
No,
committed.
it was one of the like key scenes of that episode with me and Hoa, and it was like that moment of like I'm confronting him and actually teach him the last lesson of nothing is more precious than independent and freedom. We did like, oh my god, how many takes that was? That was a
Yeah, it's
lot.
quite a few takes.
And we filmed it at the end. The last thing I heard was, okay, moving on. And then the next thing I remember is me back at the holding. I was like, and everybody's around me. I was like, what happened? Like,
As
how
soon,
did I get
as soon
here?
as we cut, I just see Zui in all of that, the makeup, the prosthetics, and the disguise. He just like his body just started slumping. And I was like, hey man, we're done. You don't have to. And he just kept going and it just kept slumping. He's like, hey dude. And then he just fell to the ground. And I think that's when the first 18, that's when everyone was like, holy shit.
It was, yeah.
He's out. He's gone.
I Bill.
Hi, Bill. I know. Oh my goodness. The Vietnamese. It's about Vietnamese-ness.
Yeah.
I want to start with you, Fred, because you started with I Bill, which is a very it's
So I Bill to me for this
something. Yeah, I Bill. And Nai Lan Ye or whatever it is, right? My Vietnamese as a first generation Vietnamese American, having been born and raised in Southern California. Away from Little Saigon, though, is might be different. There are, of course, a lot of sensibilities for me watching the series and seeing myself in it. Y'all are not Vietnamese Americans.
No.
Right? You're all from different parts of the diaspora. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into your relationship with that sort of Vietnamese-ness, the culture, language, sensibilities, the if you know moments.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I grew up in Montreal, Canada. My parents came to Canada during the fall of Saigon, so they went through the boats and the refugee camps and stuff like that. And I don't know how it is with most of that generation. I'm assuming it's the same for everyone in that generation, or at least most people, is that they don't really like to talk about their traumas. They like to bottle it in, and in order to cope with it, they're very focused on like results to like make money, get a good job, like just
moving on.
Yeah, moving on. I don't know if it's a way to like kind of, win in this new world or just to distract themselves from the trauma. But I was not exposed to the Vietnam War stories as a child that much. I knew that I was not from Quebec, like now in looking back, there was a lot of like, racism when I was a kid in school. And I used to get beat up a lot. I don't know if it was because of that or it was because I was just really small compared to everyone else. Kind of like Bohm in the show. He was like very small.
The smaller
and
one. Yeah.
Then he grew.
You just had to get really strong, But my only exposure to Vietnamese culture was my family. I didn't have that many Vietnamese friends. And the only Vietnamese acting or media that I was exposed to was variety shows, Paris by Night. Yeah. But so for me, that's what my vision of Vietnamese acting was, like those skits and, like stuff. So in my mind, I never thought I could act in something Vietnamese and be grounded and cinematic, until I came to set and I met actually like all these amazing Vietnamese actors and the way that they would perform, Go Kieu Chin and Ki Duyên and all those people. And they're such amazing actors and very grounded, and Hoa as well, I guess.
Oh, thanks, man. I can't. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So
Well,
for me,
maybe I can't say the same
that was the
thing about
moment
you.
for me when I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. Because I never thought it was cinematic.
Yeah. True.
But like to pull that off, it was really like, oh, this could work, and now it's like, what else can we do now,
Yeah. I was so glad when I first met you and got to work with you in that first couple of weeks, just because how we were like just trying to test ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we were like, how does your Vietnamese? How does my Vietnamese? And then we both spoke to each other. We're like, we're going to get along just fine.
A way to expose my level of Vietnamese in front of everyone here.
Which was great.
Yeah.
Our Vietnamese is great.
As the scholar in this setting, the go-to person, I would say, Zui, your Vietnamese is on point, man.
My God.
And your dialect has to be very distinct for the character that you play too, right?
Yeah.
You were born in Vietnam.
I was born in Hanoi, Vietnam. I speak fluent Vietnamese. And but then for the character, it's because it takes place in like 1970. So I had to like age my accent back, to that time. And then also because Mutton grew up with Bone and the captain. So, when you grow up with your friend, you kind of pick up, accent from them, And then I incorporate all of that to make Mutton's accent.
That's actually a good point for the era of the Vietnamese language
right.
because, you know, like I guess us, for me and Hoa, it's our Vietnamese is really influenced by our parents. And they left during the 70s and they don't know new slang. So it's kind of like, I like to compare this as like an American family leaving America in the 70s and their children speaking in disco slang, you know? So it feels like that for us, but it worked out in a way that it fits our character.
Yeah, like the language and the accent has sort of just remained and stuck in the 70s, and it's never had that a chance to evolve into the modern day Vietnamese.
Yeah. And studying about the accent and the language back then, I had a culture shock. Because I'm like,
What do you mean? What do
there's
you mean?
some words that I've like.
Which words?
Oh my god, you can't.
Let's get into it. Let's get into it.
Yeah, tell me every single word.
Like in the translation, I remember getting the first translation for the script, and I'm like, these are not Vietnamese words. I've never heard about these words before. And then I talked to Jenny Chang Lei, she's
one of the
script consultant.
consultants.
And I talked to her about it. And I was like, oh no, yeah, these are old word from back then. I was like, oh, okay, that's a whole new vocabulary that I need to learn. And like consulting Fred also, and Fred's like, no, my family's used this. I was like, okay, so I'll keep this, and
Right. And I mean, y'all's relationships with the Vietnamese community or your own respective like communities in diaspora. I wonder, even like, have your parents seen the series? And what have they? Hoa?
No, my parents haven't seen it. They're actually coming in soon for the premiere. I just thought I'd bring my parents along because I think it'd be nice for them to see it. And, it's an important story that I hope we're telling here for a lot of the wider Vietnamese diaspora across the world. And for them to be able to sit here and watch this story in person, I just felt like it would be nice for them to see this. Forget about me. They'll probably hate what I've done to this, but they will at least watch the show and be proud of the fact that, somebody's taken the time to tell a part of the story that has never really been seen before. But no, they haven't seen this. I've kept this from them because
it's tough, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
And I like how you mentioned, and they'll be proud of the people.
Yeah, they'll be proud of all of you guys. They'll be proud of everybody in the story, telling this story, but they'll probably watch me.
That's
and
the
be
trauma
like, okay,
talking.
Yeah.
I'm like thinking after, the first episode, which is what was going to be shown at the premiere, there's a lot of trauma to unpack. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure yet how I'll share the show with my own parents.
Right.
Right.
And that's a challenge too, because I was, when I was filming that scene in particular, it was the tarmac scene, and I wanted to ask questions, but I don't want to bring stuff up that they don't want to talk about. And it might be very triggering for people who went through that. And I mean, we had actually some of the cast members who went through stuff like that, like Joseph and I think Vian as well. They played soldiers in the show, and they, it was good for them to revisit these situations because I think it was very cathartic for them. And they were able to spark a conversation, and they were able to at least hopefully start sharing and healing.
And you could tell that they felt, like, even while we were shooting, you could tell that they felt it very deeply as we were doing it.
Yeah.
There's just all these different meta layers of trauma and identity and culture and experience.
Yeah. Remember that thing that you did 50 years ago? Can you recreate that for us? Yeah.
It's wild because I'm sure that day does like replay and there's flashbacks and flash forwards from like the events that happened on that day and afterward, right?
Yeah.
Zui, have you shared this?
I have not. I have not shared it with my parents, but it's very funny hearing you guys talking about like the culture and the trauma of the Vietnamese people in America and in Canada, because I grew up in Hanoi, Vietnam, and very, very fortunate. I grew up like decades after the war, so there were like little to no trauma for the people in Vietnam, and like at least I can speak for my like environment, like my neighborhood and my family. We never talk about the war. We never talk about we the only like we talked about Ho Chi Minh reunited the North and the South and defeated the American. And that's it. But like no details about the Southern Army, the Southern people, and the suffering of both sides, the North and the South. So coming into this show, it's like reading the book for the first time in 2016. It was my first time getting exposed to this side of the story that I've never been taught about, never heard about, So I'm pretty sure if I show this show to my parents, they won't have such a big reaction to it as like people,
Yeah.
over here, which is very interesting.
Right. That Vietnamese-ness and the diaspora and just Vietnamese-ness in general out beyond the diaspora, right? In the homeland too can be, it's so diverse, it's so multiplicitous, it's varied, right? And nuance, which I think we try to, the show tries to get into. Zui, in 2016, when you read The Sympathizer, that was here in the US?
In Canada.
Oh, in Canada,
yeah.
yes. Because the book there's no Vietnamese translations of it.
Yeah, there's a bootleg Vietnamese translation.
Right.
But it lost all of the nuance of the English language.
There is, isn't there? There's a Vietnamese translation of it. Yeah.
But it must be tough to because Viet Thanh Nguyen's writing is such a specific way,
Yeah.
right? And to translate that, it you kind of remove the wordsmanship of basically his skill of writing. I feel.
On the auditions, I mean, it was an open casting call to everyone in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
For this adaptation directed by director Park Chan-wook.
Yeah.
Had Robert Downey Jr. We knew that he was going to be in it. This Pulitzer Prize winning novel.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the audition process like?
Oh man, it was. I mean, I think it's similar. Me and Hoa went through similar. It was 9 months of auditioning.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think 8 or 9 months, right? And it was from the first self tape. Actually, Zui was my reader for my first self tape. That's almost 2 years ago, actually.
It was in January.
January 2022.
There
There we
remember. The day everything changed.
Yeah, I just got a message from Fred out of the blue. It's like, I need a Vietnamese reader. Can you read for me? And I was like, okay, what is this Vietnamese thing that you're doing? I was like, I'm Vietnamese too,
No, I get in on this,
So tama, this guy.
so
You doing, man?
New Tree.
stop.
Exactly. He's so
don't,
new Tree.
Don't encourage him.
He's
been calling me New Tree all day.
He's really Baidak, really new Tree.
Okay, this part gonna get cut. No, and then we did it, and from that moment, I was like, Fred, you got it, you got the role, and I was right. And then I got the global open call 2 weeks after. I saw it on Facebook, and I thought it was a scam because I'm like, Vietnamese story with Vietnamese cast and Robert Downey Jr. and Park Chan-wook, A24, HBO. What is this?
Right.
This can't be real. So I sent it to Fred, and Fred's like, no, that's the one.
Yeah, I was about
You're
to say,
right, it's a scam. You're being punked. Actually, coaches walking through.
And this is a cool thing that I don't think Hoa knows about this. I auditioned for the captain,
Right.
and I was told I was too young for the captain. So
And they needed to dumb it down. So that got me. Yeah.
And
You were
I-
too smart for the captain.
And I auditioned for multiple other characters and heard nothing back. And then Fred introduced me to his agent, who is now my agent, Sandy Martinez, best agent in the world. And then she sent me an audition for the young captain, the younger version of the captain.
Like the young.
Yeah.
Back then it was like
Squid
17-year-old.
Okay, the Squid Captain.
Yeah,
the
Squid
Squid
Captain.
Captain.
That's exactly that one.
Yep.
arguably the best captain.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So I stalked Hoa for a while just to try to study him to be the young version of him.
So that's who was messaging me at
Yeah,
3 a.m. every day.
I guess it kind of worked out if you were studying Hoa and the captain in the role that you eventually landed in.
Right.
Mun.
Yeah.
Eventually.
I mean,
it's mine.
technically, that's what
Yeah.
I mean. You've been doing.
Yeah. All those confession pages.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
read all of
yeah.
that. You read all of his.
All that lemon juice. You know. How does it feel now knowing that it's over, and that everyone in the world has probably seen this at this point,
Oh my God.
right? And that you all are at the forefront of it. Not just you all, but your relationship with each other too, as the Three Musketeers.
Feels like
Wow.
it feels like it because the way that we were on set is how we are now, you know. Aside from being exhausted and just having to like be on point with our work.
But now you can buck me all the drink be muck.
Oh
right?
my gosh!
Oh.
All the cha.
All the chat poured out, you know?
Okay.
No, I was.
Because we were this way on set and we're still very close with the other cast members as well, and we're still texting each other a lot. It feels like we're still working in a way.
Yeah.
It feels like it's not really over, and it just like the work is over. But then, like right as soon as we wrapped, we took a trip for a month in Vietnam. Part of us, I'm sure. I mean, I can't speak for these two, but we just wanted to continue hanging out. Like we didn't want to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Yeah, I mean, my God, F7. It's like maybe I'm biased, but the relationship, the love between the three blood
That you
brothers.
observed from afar in your
Yeah,
house.
yeah,
in
the
the
relationship.
in that tower. Yeah.
That tower probably had air conditioning too.
which is
I was
really
in a box. Zoe. I was in a box, losing my mind. Zoe.
I fainted. Okay.
You made me write like a
And it wasn't
million
even-
times the same story.
And it's kind of cool. Like Mutton character, he's doing throughout the show. He's already got the burn, so the only way for him to see the outside world is through the captain's letters. And for me, as Zui as an actor on set, I don't have much scenes in the between episode, in like the middle episodes. So I get to watch these guys, do their job and experience the story from that outside perspective, just like my character, which is really
So
cool.
meta.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so meta.
Except for when you appear as a ghost in some
Oh,
of, right? And you're there in the moment. But then
Yeah.
you're also a figment of Hoa, the
What's the
captain.
imagination?
Yeah.
Which is so tricky to act. Because I'm
Yeah.
like, we figure
Not for
out
me.
from the
You pop up my head every day.
we figure from the beginning that these moment in the between in
Yeah.
Hua's head is not the real Mutton.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is what the captain wants Mutton to say to him at that moment.
Yeah.
And his trauma talking to him, and then it get revealed at some point that is actually him talking to himself in F6. So which is so tricky to act because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm playing like 5 different character.
Yeah.
Every
yeah.
time I appear, I'm doing a different
Mung
character for
had
him.
many different versions of himself.
Yeah.
And then which one was the
Right.
real Mung?
Yeah, and then come episode 7 where I get to actually be the real Mutton and have all that. It is
The mask comes off.
see the mask comes off
Yeah.
literally.
But
yeah.
you're still wearing a mask.
Yeah. And I like wearing that. I cannot emote.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so you a lot of eye acting.
How long was the process to put that
Oh
on?
my God, 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours.
Wow.
And
It
yeah,
would have been
and-
fastest just to burn yourself real.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
but it's like, like, honestly, like the glue they use because we were shooting in Thailand under the heat because they don't want the sweat to like unstick the
Yeah,
prosthetics, so they really like glue it in, and the glue burns like hell. But I love it. It's like it
That's
put
weird.
you
Okay.
right
That's
into
a
the
weird
The
character.
sadism coming out, yeah.
Wait a
I
minute.
told you he was Baydak.
Reality imitating art here,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and in the last 200 pages of the book is so dense.
Yeah.
It's so
A
complex
lot
and
happens.
and I think it took me like 10 times, like rereading over and over to actually get, like, I still don't think I get more.
Is that why you made me rewrite it again?
Exactly.
Just didn't get
exactly.
All the pages.
Exactly.
Can you
Buy some
simplify this for me?
So,
How many pages did you really write? You know, and was that your real handwriting?
So the cool thing about that is that early on in pre-production, they got me to write a page in my own handwriting. I can't remember what they got me to write, but I think it was probably just the beginning of the novel. They got me to write it. And then they used my writing to create a font. And so there is a whole font created from my handwriting that they've used.
How do we get this
How do I
font?
get that?
Yeah.
How can I
wanna
download
have
that?
And so they used that to print the entire stuff that you see in the series. So
That is
all
crazy.
of those pages are it's my handwriting, but computerized into a font. And then,
wow.
yeah.
And here I was feeling bad for you. I have to write all of
could
that.
just
I
write
snuck out every night when you locked me up and just used an actual computer to type it up.
Can't be bothered to just write for real. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, because you don't get spell
Really
check.
get into it, you know, the method acting of
That's
it.
true, yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a thesaurus and spell check. So using a computer, I could be more articulate like Viet.
Mm. There is a billboard. I mean, Hoa, the billboard, your face is on it.
Well, all of our faces, yeah, are on
Right,
it.
Not
right.
my
Yeah,
jawline.
yeah.
I mean, as we, you know, after episode 7, your feelings about the series as a whole,
Yeah.
and you're the captain. You know,
Yeah.
How does it? Is it surreal for you? I guess that's the question.
Yeah,
right?
it is. It is. Like I'm obviously like humbled and held.
Really?
Ooh,
I'm not. All right. So here, no, this is my.
No, he is humble.
No, I'm very appreciative of this whole experience and just being able to play, you know, the titular character. But what I'm more, I guess, nervous and apprehensive about is, you know, I guess being an actor, I'm just worried about how, you know, it'll resonate with people. But I'm immensely proud when I've watched this like a few times of just everyone's performances. You know, like I hope the bit of chemistry that we're divulging here for the people listening is really how we worked on set. Like we were really passionate about this story. We really believed in this story, and we really wanted to make this something profound and extraordinary for people to watch. You know, I don't feel like we ever felt like we were just selfish or individual about this. We were just all sort of driven towards a common goal of trying to make this a moment for people who it really mattered for. And, you know, there's so many other cast members besides the three of us that were involved in this journey. And I just want to say, like, you know, Alan, who plays Sonny, has such a, you know, he's not a big character in this story, but he's such a pivotal and strong, and, you know, he's the rival to the captain's character. And I just felt like every time I did scenes with him, like the passion that poured from both of us was real and what made our scenes work. And then V as well, who's like the youngest cast member in this story. Like there's just so many other people like that who brought extraordinary performances to this show that
I think it was I can't imagine other actors playing these characters.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time watching these guys work, and I can attest to, like, my God, Hoa, you know, he works 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for 8 months straight. That's just incredible. And he's like,
thanks, man.
Very little days off for the captain, you know, because it's his story. He has to be there.
Yeah, and we're in your head too.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, he's in my head.
True, that's true.
He never had a day off. He was either on set or in my head.
Rent free, living in there. You know?
And 2 languages, Vietnamese and English.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh my goodness, I feel some type of way, you know? Like I think in that this is a moment for the diaspora, the Vietnamese diaspora, but also just a big moment for y'all and in your roles as this, you know, in this Max A24 production, working alongside the likes of like Miss Sandra Oh and Robert Downey Jr., but also OGs in the Viet community, like Go Kyu Jin and Ki Duong.
Yeah.
On the sort of Vietnamese multiverse and how this series speaks to it and how y'all are participating in it. And also I think how across generations, when we talk about trauma, oftentimes it happens at the nhau or like talking around food and drink, right? At least in a Vietnamese cultural context, which I feel like is one of the common threads across the different Vietnamese multiverses that y'all come from and that we see in the series. Were there other moments like that throughout the series that felt very Viet multiversal for you?
I like, you know, like Vietnamese people are very they're very they're very omao. So like when we get scenes where we're all together, it's like the most chaotic thing, but like in the most wholesome way, you know?
Yeah.
There's a few times that, because he's not there because he's working all the time, but there's a lot of time we would just meet up, like me, the whole cast, like the soldiers, Vivi, who plays the major's wife, and everybody, Alan Chao, who played the Sunny. We all just like hide in each other's hotel room and just talk and just tell stories about how we got here.
Yeah.
Tâm sự, exactly.
That's Alan's word.
That's
Alan's
Alan.
word.
Yeah.
He's always like, he always calls like, yo, you got time for some tâm sự, bro?
Yeah, he loves the tâm sự. Yeah, the man is on Broadway now.
Yeah.
You can't be here.
Shout out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout
So
out to
yeah,
Alan
there's a lot of that, and it's, even though we all come from like a different background, different, you know, our family came from different places. In this show, I never felt alone. Like, even though I grew up in Vietnam, I had no knowledge of the trauma of the people that left. I felt like I'm a part of the journey, like everybody else. And, you know, like you go on set, you do your scenes, and it's a hard, tough scenes, and you go off set, and there's always somebody to tâm sự with and to hug, you know. And we all knew that whatever it is such a powerful thing, that the sympathizer is a thing. You know, there was time where I just like, when I was a kid in Vietnam, jumping up and down every time I hear like a Vietnamese name on screen in like an American movie. You know, when Jennifer Lawrence spoke Vietnamese.
Right.
You know, I know it is what it is, but but I felt so proud then. You know, I remember feeling so proud, like, oh my God, Hollywood movie with Vietnamese in it.
That was shot in Montreal. Did you know that?
I know. Now I knew. It's like, it's crazy. And now we got the whole show about Vietnamese people. all people in Vietnamese language.
And then you
it's-
lock them all up.
Yeah.
I want to thank the three of you, Hoa Xuande, Fred Nguyen, and Duy Nguyen, for joining us and sharing all the love and chemistry that y'all had for each other on set and off set. You know,
Cũng được.
they're there, or cũng được, right?
Yeah.
Which
I'm
is just
still
like, it's all
acting.
right.
It's all
you
right.
know?
We've been saying a lot of
It's
like
cũng được.
like these expressions in throughout the whole
the
shoot. Actually,
Vietnamese, yeah.
yeah, it's like, and sometimes me and Zui would be just like, "Yo, you want to go noi cook somewhere?" Like,
Noi cook.
it's like it doesn't
Oh,
exist, but
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like we'll
yeah.
just sure.
Sure.
Yeah, my parents hate it. I was like, what is wrong with you? Why are you using English in your Vietnamese now? I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think y'all's performance speaks to so many of us, me included, living in the diaspora, right? And being able to, as we said, seeing the faces that we're seeing in Hollywood are your faces now,
Yeah.
right? So I just want to share my gratitude for that.
Thank you, man.
Oh my
Thank you so
God,
much.
that was so much fun.
Y'all, you can really feel the love between these guys, and for me, being a part of that conversation, it really felt like home. And we ended the conversation with Henny shots. So for all of you listening out there, một, hai, ba, yo. And now, a few final thoughts from our captain and his most constant companion, our all-in-one patriarch, Robert Downey Jr. and Hoa Xuande. The big reveal of the series is the last archetype that we are introduced to, the priest, who we find out to be the captain's father, right? Could you talk a little bit about that final character, Robert?
Sure. I mean, I remember it come up early on that it would give the captain a reason to have conflated all of these archetypes together. And also, lest we forget, the entirety of this story is a rendition that he keeps giving and giving and retelling and retelling. And so I almost thought that, like, it made sense for this to be a psychological truth, that it was almost an attempt to understand his father that he didn't know. And also, I'm definitely old enough to be Hua's father, so there was a little bit of that going on.
Yeah.
I just remember it feeling like kind of a really important thing to get right, and obviously a very sensitive moment in the storytelling, a huge reveal. And of course, it happens to Hua while under the duress of essentially being tortured. So it also needed to have, I think, some sort of emotional comfort in it. It's so weird. Again, like none of these things are simple, straightforward, or easy to do. They're all like Rubik's cubes.
Right. I just like the tie-in of all those characters, and I think once you watch the 7th episode, that you finally understand why, because really this story is told through the captain's perspective, and I like that idea that it's like a psychological rendition of everything that is remembered and perceived up to episode 7. So all these characters that represent the establishment, different establishments of America, have all a tinge or a similarity to something that is within him that he can't quite figure out. And then it finally reveals itself in Ep 7 when he's, yeah.
And by the way, right, that's after a year in solitary.
Yeah.
And, they finally feel your confession is ready enough for the commissar. And then there's that other turn. It's like,
Yeah.
Right.
it's almost inconceivable. And I have to hand this to Viet. And, reading the novel, you're able to create all of these dimensions because that's the virtue of the reader, right? As you fill everything out. But having to have rendered this in real time, by episode 7, every plate that has been set up is spinning to either now drop, be caught before it hits the ground, or resonate together. So it really all needs to culminate in this episode. And I think it was one of the great achievements of this whole, the cast, the crew, the showrunners, all the department heads, was everybody kind of knew it really needed to lead to these big multiple realizations in episode 7. It's what you want with a great series, right? The limited series we've seen over the last bunch of years, they all kind of bring you to a place where you're glad that you had gone along for the ride, and you kind of have this contemplation on what it all meant looking back.
For me personally, I think it's clever as well, but the professor's reveal, you know, when you find out that he's also the author of this book, because it's a mentor character that probably confides the most in the captain and vice versa for years, and to have a fatherly figure turn out to be not what you seem is devastating. Yeah.
It's funny too, because it's the captain's own duplicity being played against him, except it's personal.
Yeah.
Whereas I know that for the captain, this whole journey for him is personal, but I'm looking here, thinking back on episode 7, and it also is about him freeing himself and his own realization about the preciousness of independence and freedom. Also has to be freedom from his judgment about what he's been put through when he was, you know, incorrectly taken to perhaps be an enemy of the very state he was out doing the bidding of. I mean, it's like, it's so crazy.
Yeah.
But it's those complexities that I think, you know, great myths introduce us to these kind of situations that seem like, oh, that can never happen in real life. But they do in their own different ways. But the escape, you know?
Yeah.
And the idea that your confession will be for yourself. And in a way, the confession is then the story. So in a way, it's going back to Viet telling this story to try to give a perspective through literature and all that stuff. It's like, boy, oh boy, we didn't know what we were in for when we started this thing, but we pretty much kind of almost pulled it off. So
it's like an inception of sorts.
Yeah.
Story within a story, but who wrote it? Yeah.
Yeah, the meta.
Yeah.
It's so meta.
It's so meta.
Uber meta. Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. We're so fortunate and so lucky to have been able to have this conversation with you both here at the end of the series, and congratulations on a wonderful, wonderful show.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you for guiding Hoa and I through our wrap-up therapy session, too.
And with that, it's a wrap for us. For now, anyway. Wink, wink, Hollywood. Thank you all so much for joining me on this journey, and I really do hope to see you on our next one together. A special thanks to director Park Chan-wook, executive producers Don McKellar, Niv Fichman, Robert Downey Jr., Susan Downey, and Amanda Burrell, author Viet Thanh Nguyen, and the entire cast and crew of The Sympathizer. Also, a shout out to Ji-woo Kim in Seoul. And until next time, Philip chúc các bạn thường lộ bình an, mai mốt hẹn gặp lại nha. The Sympathizer podcast is produced by the Mashup Americans for HBO. From HBO, executive producer is Becky Rowe. Producers are Margaret Kelly and Kenya Reyes. Executive producers are Amy S. Choi and Rebecca Lehrer. Producers are Sarah Pellegrini and Thomas Liu. Development producer is Nicole Kelly. Production manager is Shelby Sandlin. The show is mixed by Pedro Rafael Rosado.